It's over 70 years since I was liberated from Bergen-Belsen in April 1945. As a survivor of the Holocaust, I hoped the world would be a better place after the war. Sadly, I was wrong.
Thank you so much for meeting me.
No,
I watched
pleasure.
it and I absolutely loved every second of it. I found it really, really very interesting indeed. When I was watching the movie, the documentary on Tomi, I just thought that is somebody who has, in a world where it's not always easy to stand up and be counted, that he was, and that he's continuing to stand up and be counted, and he's bridged an awful lot of gaps between various peoples and religions and so on. I just wanted to find out a little bit about how you came to make this documentary. Where did that come from?
Okay, June. This documentary, Condemned to Remember, is essentially a sequel to the film we made with Tomi in 2012, 2014 called Close to Evil.
Okay, this was about Hilda Michnia.
Yeah. So in Close to Evil, Tomi goes in search of the SS woman and discovers, A, that she doesn't want to meet him, but also discovers about her past and the fact that she was a convicted war criminal. But we also discover in that film her testimony to Bergen-Belsen Museum, in which she states that she had worked in a slave labour camp in Poland, that there were approximately 2,000 female Jewish women in the slave labour camp that she was in, near a great network of camps called Gross Rosen in Poland. And she said that she never saw any brutality or inhumane treatment to prisoners. And that when they were forced to abandon the camp in January 1945, she openly states that she was with the prisoners on what was to become a death march, but she said that on her section of the march there was no ill treatment, and we shared the same food and the same sleeping quarters and conditions as the prisoners. We found a woman in Israel for that film who was on the death march, Luba Warszawska, and Luba had been on the same death march, and Luba said, from the moment we were evacuated from the slave labour camp, we were shown not one moment of compassion, not one gesture of empathy was demonstrated. There was no recollection of soup, there was no recollection of hot chocolate. She remembers sleeping in, if they were lucky, they were put into a barn to sleep with the cattle, because the cattle were warm. And she said to us in that film, she said, from the moment we left, any of those who were unable to walk and keep up the pace, they were shot. So, as a result of that film, and it was screened in Germany, complaints were made to the prosecutor's office for Nazi crimes in Hamburg. And that led to an investigation into Hilda. And that investigation has been reopened since the film, since we recorded the scene where the prosecutor's office said we've no evidence to suggest that she was on the death march.
This is the
we've evidence that, obviously, by her own admission, she was on the death march, but we've no evidence to suggest that anyone was murdered in the first 7 days. We've no concrete evidence. But now the attorney...
Was Tomi part of that?
No. Tomi was in Bergen-Belsen.
Okay.
And what happens is that this woman, after the slave labour camp in Poland was evacuated in January 45, she ends up in Bergen-Belsen for the last few months as a guard. A lot of the guards from the Gross Rosen network came to Bergen-Belsen because the numbers in Bergen-Belsen swelled, and the guards that had been at up to no good in Eastern Europe were now up to no good in Western Europe. Are you with me?
I'm with you now.
And so the film starts off as a bit of a sequel, and then we get bogged down in terms of making the film. We got bogged down in slow glacial progress of the legal investigation into the woman, because we set out thinking, June, that we were going to do the last Nazi trial, and that this last Nazi trial had in some way been precipitated by our movie, Close to Evil.
And in fact it was.
And it was.
In fact it was. Like, I mean, you should take credit for that.
No, I accept all credit coming.
Yeah.
However, in relation to Condemned to Remember, when we were in Germany in 2015, when we started this process, the Syrian civil war was at its most brutal phase. And millions of people were fleeing Syria and Libya and other parts. And there was this bottleneck of people, and the images of people drowned.
To get,
and the children
I
washed up on beaches.
I saw that, and you could see the children being handed over fences. And
so Tomi suggested, he said, you know, here we are, we're at a bit of a hiatus in our journey to find out what's going to happen in relation to whether or not there's going to be a last Nazi trial. And yet we're finding that hundreds of thousands of people are making their way across Europe looking for a home, fleeing war and persecution. And they're being denied any sanctuary. And he said, that sounds familiar to me. So the film then began to morph into another scenario. And sometimes these happen. These are, you know, these moments of serendipity. It goes right back to Columbus. I'm setting out for India, and I find America. So we set out to pursue the story of the investigation into this Nazi SS woman, and we go off then as events in Europe unfold. And very importantly, June, when one of the women in the film, Alexandra Senft, who's the granddaughter of the man, Hans Ludin, who signed a lot of the deportation orders for Tommy's family to be deported to Auschwitz.
That was was it her great-grandfather, the younger girl?
The younger girl is the great-grandfather, and the older dark-headed woman is her mother, Alexandra, and she's obviously the granddaughter.
She was an amazing woman.
Yeah. So you had a scenario that we filmed there where both the granddaughter and the great-granddaughter had reached out to Tomi in a way that Alexandra Senft said to me, I've been waiting all my life for an encounter with the likes of Tomi. Because of the memory we have of being the descendants of the perpetrators.
And they couldn't talk about their grandfather, apparently. They couldn't mention
They
his
couldn't
name.
talk, but she broke the silence.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very strong moment when the great-granddaughter of a Nazi war criminal promises Tomi that she will keep the memory alive of what happened.
Really touching.
And it's also important because she was only 19 when we filmed that scene. I think it's important also that we bridge the generations.
Yes, I agree completely.
Because a lot of people can go to this film and they say, yeah, well, Tommy's talking about events in 1935, 39, 45. You know, what relevance has it got to us? Well, as he says at the end, quoting William Faulkner, the past is not dead. The past is not even the past. And when Alexandra says, at least in Germany, we're trying to deal to some extent with the skeletons from the Nazi era and also the communist era. She said, Gerry, in Eastern Europe, there's a great reluctance. And that propelled us, I think, into the very rich territory that we went into. When we went into Poland, when we met people like Jan Gross, when we went to the village in Poland that the villagers had murdered the Jewish neighbours, the village of Jedwabne.
Yes, that was horrific.
Now,
that was horrific.
when we went in, the atmosphere in that village, you could cut with a knife. There was nobody. We just got daggers looks. There was nobody who wanted to help us find a location or, you know, what are you doing? When they saw the IRL van, the Jeep that we had, because we travelled, don't forget, we travelled all across Europe.
I'm amazed that you did that. Did you drive?
We drove most of the way, and we'd get Tomi to fly or get a train.
Yeah.
And because we weren't expecting Tommy to rough it, but he had to rough a good bit of the
Well, fair
journey.
play to him. I saw him walking down a snow-filled road.
Oh
And
yeah,
he's
he
hale and
had to do
hearty.
that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he had to do. He had to
Fair
do
play
that.
to him.
Yeah, after all, it's show business.
Yeah. But tell me about this town, the one that you mentioned.
Jebvabne.
Yes. Tell me what.
Jebvabne illustrates a problem that I think we could have filmed in many villages and towns across Eastern Europe. It just so happens that this place is quite iconic. In 2001, Jan Gross, who features in the film, published a small book called Neighbours. And in Neighbours, he tells the story of how hundreds of Jewish people who had lived in this village and its surrounding area for hundreds of years were massacred. The bulk of them being burnt in a barn.
Yes, and they were insulted and humiliated
And
before.
raped and
the women were segregated
and
from
the
men.
women and all of that.
Yeah, and I think they forced them to sing communist songs.
They forced them to sing communist songs and all of that on the basis that the popular conception of it was that the Jews are communists, the communists are the source of all our ills, and now that the Nazis have come, we have permission to take vengeance. Not that we're going to do business with the Nazis for the conquest of Poland. We make it quite clear that there's very little collaboration between Poles and Nazis. But the erosion of all civil society by the Nazis allows bad people to take an opportunity.
Yes, it does.
Now, unfortunately, we could have shot those scenes in Lithuania, Latvia,
Yugoslavia,
Estonia, parts of Yugoslavia, Romania, Hungary. It just so happens that this was an iconic village. A great debate is still raging in Poland, and at the moment, the government that's in Poland at the moment wish to make any reference in school textbooks to this matter, a matter in which has been misrepresented by Jan Gross, and the culprits were Germans dressed as Poles. In other words, everything bad that happened in Poland had to be the responsibility of the Nazis. No Poles were involved in anything like that. Now, Poland is in the middle of a major crisis over dealing with its past. And you could say the same about the rest, a lot of Eastern Europe. And I think that's just something we deal with in the film.
Yeah, you do.
And Tommy deals with it when he goes home to his home country.
That was very moving.
And he tries, you see, June, rather than, it was very important that Tommy had then a target for his journey. And when he gets to Slovakia, the target is, why is it that in modern Slovakia, 10% of the parliament is now represented by and in the parliament are now neo-fascists?
Yes.
Who some of them wear the uniform of our tormentors.
And one of he mentioned one man in particular who was in parliament.
So the leader of the neo-fascist party is this man called Marian Kotliba.
Yeah.
And Marian Kotliba, we said, well, why don't we talk to Marian Kotliba? Yeah. Why don't Tommy, as a survivor, as a Slovak, as somebody who was forced out of the village that you lived in, never to return, basically, you know, with 35 members. Yeah. So Tommy said, even if I only get a chance to ask them 3 questions before they throw me out, let me confront them. Yeah. Let me confront them with the shame that he's bringing on Slovakia.
Yeah. And he maintained, I don't know, did they get to talk to him in the end? I don't think they did.
No. When we went to his governor's office in Banska Bystrica, in the centre of Slovakia, after many phone calls, letters, and talking to his aides and telling his people that we were on the way, and we arrived only to be told that he was at a governor's meeting upstairs and that he would get back to us, that we couldn't arrive without an appointment. And of
course you had an appointment.
And we had an understanding.
You'd been trying to get an appointment.
But this, I mean, June, quite frankly, this was our best way
Absolutely.
cinematically
Yeah.
to show that this fellow was a coward.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
And you have to contrast
Yeah.
Tommy's moral courage to go into the lion's den
Yes, absolutely.
with his lack of courage in confronting Tommy if he believed in what he was saying.
Yeah, exactly. And do you remember he was introduced? Gottlieb was introduced as the politician who couldn't be bought.
The politician who couldn't be bought.
And in fact, it seems that he was not the politician who couldn't be bought. It seemed that he was anything but.
So we have a scenario that in many parts of Eastern Europe, Gottlieb's views are popular.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're not talking about Poland specifically or Slovakia specifically. We've just seen, an extreme nationalist party being elected in Germany for the first time, with one of its leaders saying openly only a few weeks ago, the Holocaust Museum in Berlin is an eyesore. And it's about time that Germans moved on from the Holocaust. So Germany is shocked by the expression of these attitudes. And there will be a healthy debate in Germany, I've no doubt about it. However, I am worried about Eastern Europe. I am worried about the quality
of their leadership.
And I'm also worried about freedom of speech.
Yeah.
And what you're going right back to you, but Butler, the oxygen of fresh air, so that we can talk, explore, and if we have to confront skeletons in our past, well, we have to.
Yeah, yeah. It's
because the truth will has to come out, and if the truth doesn't come out, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Some time back, I watched Claude Lanzmann's show.
Yeah.
And I found that just my experience of watching it was that I found some of the narratives, the people telling their story, that they had told it before, understandable, and that they had not appeared to find any peace or resolution or peace within themselves. Now, having witnessed what they witnessed, which was truly horrific, one thing I noticed, the marked contrast between Tomi and the people I saw being interviewed in show, is that they were hollow. They were shells of people who had gone through so much that they simply shut down, that their ability to process the trauma was gone. Yeah. And that in Tomi's case, what I noticed about Tomi, and I'm not saying this is good or bad, I'm just saying that this is what I noticed having watched show, that in Tomi's case, that he has a face that's brimful of hope, that he has a face that says he's willing to embrace, he's willing to talk, he's willing to enter into dialogue, and he wants to. Yes, he's open. And he said at the very, very beginning of the documentary, I noticed that he said, I can't believe I've reached 80. I'm so happy to be here. I never thought I would. And then he said, I don't feel 80. He said, I feel young. And I looked at him and I thought, you know what? He is young. He is young. He's managed to retain, throughout all that he's been through, he's managed to retain something that will look at skeletons, won't avoid the past, will face up to things in its own time, not in a rush, not in, but... And
he's looking for the good in people.
He looks for the good, and he sees the positive, and I thought that was just really touching. I liked the fact that he was so open to others and to talking.
June, I think you're right there. I think you've spotted something in Tomi's persona that's quite unique. In relation to the testimonies in Lanzmann's epic Shoah, most of the people that he would have spoken to would have been adults at the time of the event. Tomi is a 9 and 10-year-old and a bit bewildered by the collapse of everything he knew.
All stability.
All stability.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, he was extraordinarily fortunate that his nuclear family, his mother, his father and his brother, his closest cousin and his closest aunt survived. Mm-hmm. And that gave him a sort of nucleus of stability to fall back on.
He was very, very lucky.
He was lucky. Then at the age of 14, he decides that the future, and the family decide, but Tommy's the first to go. Tommy goes to Israel as a young pioneer at the age of 14. He arrives in Israel. He goes into a kibbutz. He's living in a kibbutz for about a year.
Yeah.
You know, convinced that the land, that was to be the place of hope, because Europe, already by 1949, Stalin's paranoia had then shifted that there were Jewish plots against the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And if there was a Jewish plot against the Soviet Union, then it was a Jewish plot against all the people's republics. And then, of course, all Jews in the communist parties of Eastern Europe fell under suspicion, with the result that in 1949 there was a show trial in Czechoslovakia. And most of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia were Jews. And they were murdered by pro-Stalin communists who just fell in line with the latest Moscow line. So in that atmosphere, jumping out of what was then the Czechoslovak People's Republic and going to Israel was a good move by Tommy.
Yeah.
Tommy then doesn't speak about it for 50 odd years and finds himself in Ireland through 1959 he finds himself in Ireland, and then but by the time he becomes into his early 70s, he discovers a mission. He calls it his mission of remembrance, because all the ghosts are coming back. And the ghosts are saying, Tommy, you've had a charmed life. Are you just going to sit there in your suburban home in Rathgar? You've had a good life. You ran a jewellery factory up in Grafton Street. You did well for yourself in life. So did your brother Mickey with his tool making factory over in Israel. Are you just going to float along now until the end of your days? Are you going to
make it happen?
Make it happen.
Yeah.
So Tommy quite late in life has come to, right, I've got to tell people what happened. He calls it his mission of remembrance. I've been very fortunate, extremely fortunate now, to make the 3 films with him, which are probably going to stand the test of time, June.
They will stand the test of time.
Because here's a unique testament of what happened in the 20th century from somebody who lived in Ireland, became an Irish citizen, has added so much to Irish life.
He has, yeah.
Stephen was talking to me earlier and he said to me, make sure to tell June this. Tommy in the last 10 years has spoken to over 100,000 secondary school, second level students and comprehensives and community schools and boarding schools all over the country.
And for a man of his age,
he does twice until quite recently. He's 82 now. He would go to 2 schools per week and he would talk about his life. With the result that when the trailer was posted on Facebook by Eclipse Pictures, or distributors, over 250,000 hits were registered on the Facebook page by a lot of people and their friends who had heard of Tommy over the last 10 years. So Tommy had tapped in to a whole young generation of Irish people who knew very little about what happened in 1945, found it extraordinary that they were meeting a man who'd been beaten up at the age of 9 by the Gestapo and thrown into a concentration camp and had survived it.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I noticed as well? I saw when Tommy went into the mosque in Dublin, I thought that was absolutely wonderful. I thought it was beautiful that he was able to celebrate his birthday in a mosque as a survivor of the Holocaust, as all those other things. I thought it was wonderful of the Muslim community to accept him in. What I thought was interesting was that he, without any ceremony at all, and it was really subtle, and this is what I like about how he delivers the documentary. We're allowed watch it. We're not given cues. We're not you know, we're let come to our own conclusions. He allows you, he gives you, he's fair, and that he lets you see this. But I thought it was really interesting that he put on the Star of David.
That was critical.
Yeah.
It was critical he did
I
that.
thought that was just
Yeah.
a very pivotal moment
Yeah.
in that particular conversation that he had in the mosque, that he quietly, without any ceremony, he just simply, like you would put on a hat, like you would put on a pair of gloves, that he simply took out the Star of David and he put it on to his lapel, and I thought that was really moving.
Yeah. Now, for those who are listening to our conversation, he puts on the yellow star that he would have been forced to wear as a young boy in the village of Meresice in Slovakia.
Yeah.
And he puts that on. And every school he goes to, he does that at the start of his talk. And it's a moment where everyone has to register. Something special is about to unfold here.
Yes.
And I think we recorded a unique moment of history. You more used the term, Tomi's face is full of hope. That's a very hopeful scene.
Yeah.
It's also a scene I'm very proud of, because all of the people in that room are Irish citizens.
Mm-hmm.
They're black, they're Arabs, they're from Bosnia-Herzegovina, they're Irish converts to Islam, and here they are embracing and sharing a birthday party at the end of the holy month of Ramadan with a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah.
Right? Now, in his own little way, Tomi is building his little bridge.
Yes. Yes.
Back to you with Butler. We are responsible for our own particular patch and our own particular set of responsibilities. And we have an obligation to try and see the world from the other person's perspective and put ourselves into their shoes. So, just as Tomi said to me, he said, you know, that SS woman might just need somebody to say, someone like me to say, have you got something that you want to get off your mind?
Yeah.
A moment of redemption. So at the best, he was offering her a moment of redemption, and she spurned it in Close to Evil.
Yeah.
Alexandra Senft, of course, was seeking the bridge. Yeah. So in Close to Evil, he builds a bridge with the family who were descended from the person who decimated his family.
Yes.
And in Condemned to Remember, he's building bridges again. A little bridge with the Muslim community in Ireland.
Yes.
Out in Blanchardstown with Sheikh Umar, who very generously asked him to come at the holy month.
And he got a lovely birthday cake.
And he got a birthday cake. And I have to tell you a good one here now, June. He's allergic to kiwi fruits.
Oh, bless him.
And the cake is festooned with kiwi fruits.
Oh, bless him. Oh,
so he had to tiptoe his way around the cake.
Yeah, God.
Other than that, we would have had to bring him
How do you tell them?
Hospital. However, he builds another little bridge with the Syrian refugee in the film Condemned to Remember, Sami Ayoub, the lad in Germany.
I found that very interesting. He walked through Turkey.
He walked from Turkey all the way to Germany.
Amazing.
Yeah. And Sami represents...
Yeah. And he was articulate, which I love, because you see, trouble is that sometimes people think, oh, there's the boogeyman, and they attribute features to them, like a long beard, or you know, they look different, or whatever. And the fact is that Sami was articulate, and he made very good points, and he was worth listening to. And I thought that was a fantastic ambassador.
I met Sami during the research phase when I did a trip to Germany to find out a bit more about what was going on in relation to the trial and all of that. And Hans-Jürgen Brennecke, who is the man that filed the charges against Hilda.
And his father was...
he said
110%
110% Nazi.
Yeah.
Now, Hans-Jürgen's involved in assisting all the refugees in the town.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Hans-Jürgen who introduced me to Sami.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, right, there are now 1 million refugees finding a life for themselves in Germany. I'm not going to talk to 1 million.
No.
Sami has to represent that young cohort of refugees from the hell that is Syria. And as you suggest, among the million there are poets,
Yes.
there are short story writers, there are engineers, there are nurses and doctors, there are architects, there are farmers, there are street sweepers. They all probably have one thing in common. They're all striving for a better life. There was a misnomer that by bringing in 1 million refugees, you brought in the potential of terror and ISIS cells and all of that. But the Forum for an Open Democracy, and did a study since 1975 to 2015 or 2016. They looked at every terrorist incident in Western Europe and North America for over 40 years. And they tried to establish how many refugees had been responsible for acts of terror in the West, we call it. And the numbers of the thousands of acts of terror, unfortunately, that have been perpetrated in the last 40 or so years, refugees have been responsible for 0.4%. A very large study by the Forum for Open Democracy, who looked at the figures, looked at the perpetrators, looked at their backgrounds, looked where they were from, all that. A drop in the an infinitesimal number were refugees. So Germany, that sequence in Germany with Sammy, Tomi builds a bridge to a young man who comes from a country that would fraternal relations or friendly relations with any person of the Jewish persuasion would not be encouraged.
No.
And there you have it, another little bridge built on both sides by both parties. And then he said to me, Gerry, I have to go to Bosnia because we were smug in Europe that it will never happen again. And we go to the iconic location again of Srebrenica.
Avdic,
Nejad Avdic.
Avdic, yes.
Nejad, he speaks to Nejad, who survived the point-blank execution.
Amazing. He was shot several times.
He was shot several times.
He said he was in horrific pain and he wanted to die, and apparently the guards refused to touch them. They said they didn't want to touch them because they were unclean and they didn't want to make sure that they were dead. They just assumed that they were dead. But there was
motherfuckers are dead.
Yeah.
That's what one of them said.
And then did you see the incident in the van where they were being transported?
Oh,
and he kicked the guy in the head. And then he said, "Oh, you stink, you stink." And then he said, one of the other guys said, "Oh, they've all shit themselves. They're skunks," he said. And just the lack of humanity.
Yeah. Now, that scene mirrors a scene that we include from the archive of the activities of the SS or of the Einsatzgruppen killer squads that went into Eastern Europe hunting Jews and mowing down Jews and communists and trade unionists and intellectuals.
Anybody who disagreed.
Anybody. And that scene then, anybody alive in 1941 in Eastern Europe and alive in Bosnia-Herzegovina and the former Yugoslavia in 1995 would say very similar acts are now occurring. And it was interesting when he talked to Nejad and Hassan and Fatima in Bosnia, that they all felt that, like him, they were condemned to remember, but they all had an obligation.
Yeah.
You know. And there they were there. So here, another European Muslims here since for maybe a millennia, and that's what happened there.
I thought it was interesting that Avdic, is it Avdic?
Yeah, Avdic.
Avdic. He said that he had 3 daughters.
Was
it
he did.
Avdic. I the name.
Nejad Avdic.
Avdic.
Yeah,
and
he
was, and you could see how he was full of empathy.
Yeah,
and
survivors are winners. Back to your observation about Tomi. He was a man of hope because Nejad had decided to go back and live in Srebrenica, even though half the village is still Serb.
Yeah. And
half the village, therefore, is very reluctant to acknowledge that they were involved in murdering so many. And I'm in regular contact with Nejad. You know, the current mayor of Srebrenica is a Serb. and has made it clear that he believes that there was no genocide. So the whole issue of denial, of dealing with the
Comes
past,
again. It's
is
like
a
cycle.
2017 issue
Yeah.
in parts of Europe. It's nothing to do with history. The past is not dead. The past is not the past.
So the memorial that was pointed out, where Nazad pointed out all his 40 family members?
Yeah, he lost around 40.
And he pointed out the names. He said, "This is my father's name." So
Yeah.
that's just made up,
Yeah.
according to the mayor.
Or else that they were killed in battle or whatever they are.
Yeah, and it's just
Not
made up.
slaughtered.
They also said as well that of the 8,327 people in that monument, whose remains they located, they said that there was many more that they couldn't. Because they were
They're
simply,
still finding bodies.
Yeah, they just couldn't match DNA, or else the entire family had been wiped out. So they had no DNA to find it. They couldn't even find one member to identify, in which case they couldn't identify any of them.
So June, Tomi was getting a bit sick. We didn't know how sick he was until we got home. But he was coughing and not sleeping when we were finishing the scenes in Slovakia. And then we had to drive for the best
Is this
part
when he went back to his hometown?
Yeah, but when we left Slovakia, in terms of the schedule, we drove down to Bosnia.
Okay.
And that was a 2-day drive.
Okay.
From Slovakia down to Srebrenica.
Okay.
And he said, I have to go. I have to meet these people. Little did we know that Tomi had a serious illness, and within 3 weeks would have major surgery when we got home.
Goodness.
And he finishes the film. His commentary track was recorded in his home at the fire after he'd been in hospital for nearly 16 weeks.
That is amazing.
So we didn't know in January whether we'd be able to finish the film. Because I was not going to get a third-party narrator to tell us what Tomi was thinking.
No, we needed Tomi.
So, heroically, Brendan Deasy actually recorded in 2 recording sessions. We went down to Tomi's house, the fire was on, it was in January, it was cold, he had a blanket over him, he was back down to skin and bone, and he recorded over 4 or 5 hours his final commentary thoughts. And I knew then, I said, regardless of his performance, what a heroic gesture that he can't physically get in to finish the film into a dubbing theatre. We have to do it here. It's not the greatest scenario in terms of a feature documentary, that you do it in somebody's living
Well, I gotta tell you, from as somebody who loved every second of watching it, and realizes the historical value of what you've done. That sound was perfect.
I think so too. I think Brendan Deasy did a great job. You don't even hear the logs crackling.
No, you don't hear it. I can tell you now, I thought that he was in a studio. When that was being recorded, that he was in a studio.
So I know that Stephen June said to me, he said, please cover the school's angle. So at the moment, it's on a cinema release around certain cinemas in Dublin. At the weekend, we're showing in the Galway Junior Fleadh.
Okay.
And there's 290 young people going to see the film in Galway tomorrow.
Okay.
And then it opens in the Eye Cinema in Galway. On Sunday, we're screening at the Cork Film Festival.
Okay.
And then it opens in the Gate Cinema in Cork for a week or so.
Okay.
But on top of that, over 50 schools now have contacted us.
Okay.
Right? And what's happening is, in cinemas all over the country over the next 6 weeks, schools will go to the cinema and meet Tomi at the end of a special screening.
Okay.
And in that sense, we've had a great response all this week. We've screened in Swords, we've screened in Dundrum, We screened here in the IFI. We packed out the IFI yesterday.
I have no doubt.
And when Tomi walks out as the credits roll, the impact of a character who's just walking off the pages of history in front of them.
Yeah.
Usually the questions and answers are running for about an hour before somebody said, look, Murder on the Orient Express is about to start, you better leave.
you know what I thought was, again, I noticed about Tomi when he was in his hometown.
Yes.
And he returned to his hometown and he met that man coming down the street.
Yeah.
And he said to him, did you know my father? You knew my father. And he knew that the guy knew his father, but he needed to hear us, the viewers, to hear that, yes,
these were guys in a little bar just across from the barn.
These were real. Like, this happened.
This old man
come from here.
Yeah.
This wasn't staged.
Yeah, I remember your father. He said he used to have, your grandfather had a shop across the street. Yeah. And of course, I think that's a very strong scene when he walks into the field. Now, Jim, let me tell you about that.
I had boxes of tissues beside me. I couldn't. That was.
Yeah,
so
I think
moving.
we should actually alert. You know the way when people are told about flash photography and all sorts of stuff, and if you're prone to epilepsy and all that, I think a lot of audience members would appreciate if we mentioned, please make sure you have a packet of tissues.
I agree. I agree.
Let me tell you about that scene.
Yeah.
I think it's a great scene.
It's a fantastic scene. And you know what? I feel like when Tomi spoke, it was like a word association, but it was valid and real and relevant to his moment there, and he was remembering back, but he was utterly sincere. And I felt so moved. There was many scenes in the documentary where I felt very moved, but that one was probably, for me, the culmination of the most powerful scene, where he stood there and you could hear the birds, and
the butterflies,
and you could see the grass rustling the wind. And he was saying, this is a wonderful place. We played here, we played tag, we chased, we did stuff, and we were kids.
Now, when we were in the village that morning, I said, Tomi, I think we should go into the field, and I think you should reflect on your life.
That was for me. That was
and
the most powerful.
I said to him, I said, why don't you just dig deep? So Seamus Stacey and Dylan Knapp were on cameras with 2 cameras. In general, we had 2 cameras at all stages.
Did you have a drone?
We had a drone that day.
Yeah, because there's a lovely, lovely, lovely aerial shot of him.
Yeah,
and we had see the path.
A crew from Hungary, from Budapest, arrived that morning.
And you just, to me, it was that was a wonderful.
Now we knew we were going to get some major scenes in the village, because this was going to be, and the drones and all that, they were all planned. So we were in the field, and he comes into the field, and he doesn't say anything for about 30 seconds. And I was just about to say to him, Tomi, is there something wrong? And then he started. And then Seamus looked over at me and he sort of winked. Let him go.
That was good advice.
And we just, all of us in the field that morning, lovely September morning, we just said, there he is. He's really digging deep. He's reflecting on the life that was, the life that could have been, the life that was denied him. And, to get back to your phrase, his acceptance, and that he has the little rucksack on his shoulder, and he's going to shuffle off and follow his destiny. But at that moment, he's realising, this should have been my hometown. Yeah. I should have been working the farm. I should never have left here. I shouldn't have been forced to leave here. All our family, And that brought it back, because the dereliction, everything overgrown, the shop is gone, the farmhouse is gone, There's nothing left. There's no Jews, and there's not a trace of them. And you know what? It's the big wound still, June, across Europe.
Yeah.
That a whole strata of European society was ripped up and exterminated and more or less expunged from our existence.
From history.
And
Yeah.
and here he is reflecting all that. And Tommy's not an academic. He speaks 5 languages, but Tommy worked all his life with his hands. But I think in the field, he has, as you say, he has a moment of pure poetry.
That's what I thought it was. It was just free flow. He was expressing exactly what he thought, what he felt, the memories. He mentioned something about memories flooding back.
Yeah.
And I felt for him that his memories were flooding back.
We put our arms around him at the end of that scene, and I said, well, Tommy, at least we have the end of the movie.
Yeah.
We all knew then that was the ending.
Yeah.
We're not going to get a better ending than that.
that was absolutely perfect.
Now, little did we know that the man who delivered that performance was very seriously ill.
Yeah.
And within a month would have an operation.
Yeah. That's amazing, man. I saw the scenes of him. There were several scenes of him where he was walking.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved those because I was allowed to reflect on his journey, what he was doing, how he was connecting between people.
Yeah.
I was able to see that. Yeah. And what I also noticed as well was the fact that Tommy walked tall.
Yeah.
There was never any head down or unsure. And I think he feels that this is his gift. This is his métier. This is his role in life, that he's come to a true mission and that he feels it strongly. And he's very proud to be doing it. Yeah. And I sensed that pride, that the exchange of information, that the fact that he was able to speak the way he did. I think he knows that is, some people come to recognition of their greatness maybe at different stages in their life, but he has come to it. And I think
I think you're onto something there. And I think, going back to the ghosts who visited him maybe 12 or 13 years ago to say to him, Tommy, you're going to sit in that living room in Rathgar and just rest on your laurels. Yeah. I think the ghosts are now saying, fair play, Tommy. Yeah. We are remembered. Yeah. You're after making 3 documentary films. You've spoken to children all over Ireland. You've reached out to adults. You've built bridges with people that we never thought we'd build bridges with. You've embraced the granddaughter and great-granddaughter of our murderer. Yeah. You have built a bridge with the Muslim community. Yeah. You have embraced the Syrian refugee and you've encouraged them, rebuild our lives from the ashes. Mm-hmm. You can do it too. Yeah. To give that young man. And then there's the moment when Fatima in the maternity clinic reaches out to him, and Tommy amazing. Can't complete the question, and she reaches out and she touches him on the knee and she says, I know how you feel. Yeah. And these are little moments. Yeah. They're cinematic moments because I know how you feel. If that's in an article in the Irish Times, it looks pretty dry. But in the dynamic.
What came across to me throughout the whole thing was that there was not one single person who was faking it. No. It was true.
No, the only fake are the bad guys.
Yeah.
They have got labels and all that. And it's important to show them up.
Absolute sincerity from everybody, from both sides. Yeah. That both sides built that bridge, both sides reached out. So whilst Tommy would reach to one, they had to return.
And isn't it interesting that the good authority and good works of a Hans-Jürgen Brennecker, the man who was prepared to not only say my father was 110% Nazi, but he's the man that also said, no, we have to face the truth, and this woman, 95 years of age, can't be allowed to propagate her lies. Not that we don't expect her to serve a day in prison, but what we want in court, in modern Germany, is for the court to say, sorry, we don't accept you made hot chocolate. We don't accept that you made soup for the prisoners. We don't accept that there was no real treatment. We know that there was murder from the moment you left the slave labour camp.
Yeah.
And we're going to confront the lies. That same man is involved in assisting Syrians to know their rights, involved in encouraging them to learn the German language, to find out, what were you when you were in Syria? Oh, we know a guy who was looking for an electrician and building site. That job starts next week. And, you know, so it's a seamless road. A good person in relation to confronting the Nazi memory or the Nazi legacy in Germany is also the person who introduces it to Sami and is a good person in relation. Yeah. Clearly, Fatima, Najat, Hassan, all these guys in Bosnia are good people.
Yes.
Because they immediately share with Tomi the notion that hatred's not going to get us anywhere.
Yeah.
And
Fatima said that she delivered children. She said, I don't care. She said every child is a child.
Yeah.
She said they're all the same. They all, you know, she said, I don't mind who, where, what religion. She said to me, they're children. And she said, I teach the same to my own children. And she was, wonderful. Yeah. Yeah.
So it seems a bit strange, June, but there it is. Condemned to Remember is a film with a man with a lot of moral courage at the centre of it. And it's a film that makes a very modest little assertion that the common bonds of humanity are stronger than the things that divide us and the hatreds and prejudices.
This is true.
And sometimes we've got to celebrate the common bonds of humanity.
Absolutely.
That's a very modest claim for a film, but there you go. In this era,
I actually think it's a wonderful claim for a film. Yeah. I also think as well that sometimes you need a person who's willing and brave enough and strong enough to point those out. Yeah. And in Tomi, you've got that person.
I think we have, because Tomi wasn't too sure whether or not, for instance, Kotlieba would meet him and then try to make a fool of him. You know, try to diminish him, try to belittle him. Yeah. Similarly, when he went into the village in Poland, the atmosphere was so sullen, so hostile.
I'd say that was really tough.
So Tomi was prepared to go into a nasty place and see for himself that the problem of dealing with the past was not something just that the Germans, we could leave it and let's park that one with Angela Merkel. Yeah. No, it just so happens that in the territories where there's the least openness about the past and what happened in 1940 to 45, there's the least openness to people like Sami, people in difficulty from the Middle East.
That's absolutely true.
So to understand why they're opposed to the Syrians or the people in desperate need settling amongst them, we also have to say, well, perhaps the key to understanding that is the burdens of history that they're not prepared to acknowledge.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well done.
All right.
Well done.
We could talk forever.
Yeah, listen, that's wonderful.
Thank you very much, June.
Not at all, thank you.